Welcome to The Aiders, a podcast for anyone who's ever found themselves carrying the load, lifting others up, and figuring it out along the way. This podcast dives into real stories, candid conversations, and practical advice for life's challenges. Whether you're a mom or someone who's always helping, you'll find connection, inspiration, and a little or a lot of humor here. Because when you're an aider, you're never alone.
Hey Aiders, welcome back to the podcast. It's Mikaela, and today we are talking about the D word. No, not that D word. We're talking about divorce. I'm so excited to share today's conversation with you and our special guest. But before I get into that, I wanted to talk about this week's Aider Approved. We mentioned it last week, but we want to start each week doing an Aider Approved. So something that has been helping us throughout the week or something like that. So today I wanted to share a show I found last night. It's called Widow's Bay, which I had seen previews for it on Apple TV previously, but then last night I saw it was number 1 on the Apple TV chart and decided to give it a watch. And it's just like the perfect amount of thrill, and it also has some comedy to it. I highly recommend. I've been binging. I stayed up way too late last night and have continued to binge it today as I've been working. So if you're needing something new to watch, check it out. Today, we are joined by Maddy. She is the creator of In the Second Act. I had come across her page just super randomly, and I had been wanting to get someone on the podcast to talk about divorce. And I should have asked Jesse when we went to Gabby's event last month. I didn't think about it till after. I just feel like seeing her divorce play out on Secret Lives of Mormon wives. I think this is something that a lot of women probably struggle with, like this internal battle of should I stay or should I go within their marriage? And it can be a really scary thing to even be asking yourself that question. But then I stumbled across Maddy's page, and she's actually a life and identity coach, and she helps women navigate these major life transitions. And she helps do that with clarity, confidence, and intention through her own experience. And she's also studying in school at Utah State University, studying psychology currently. So through her coaching practice, she works with women who often look like they have it all together on the outside, but inside feel exhausted, disconnected, and unsure of who they are beneath the roles and responsibilities that they've been carrying. Her work isn't just about surviving a major transition. It's about creating a life that feels aligned and authentic and fully your own. So today we're going to talk about identity, emotional labor, self-abandonment, divorce, and motherhood, and what it really looks like to step into your second act. Before I jump into today's conversation, I wanted to share a quick disclaimer. In this episode, we touch on themes related to the Mormon Church, and both Maddy and I's experiences growing up with that faith. They have shaped womanhood, marriage, identity, relationships. It's not intended to be an ex-Mormon podcast or an episode focused on criticizing the church. We're just simply sharing our lived experiences and the way that those experiences have influenced our life. Just like motherhood looks different for every woman, faith and spirituality also look different for every person. And my hope that is practicing Mormons, former Mormons, people of other faith background or no religious background can find value in this conversation. We aren't here to tell anyone how to believe, how to live, or what path they should choose. We're simply exploring the stories and the questions and experiences that have shaped us. At the end of the day, this conversation is about identity, relationships, and learning how to connect with yourself through life's biggest transitions. And I hope that you can listen with curiosity and take what resonates and leave what doesn't. I'm here with Maddy, and I'm so excited to be talking with you today. I think the topic we're going to be talking about is the D word, and I think it can be really scary for a lot of women to even let their minds go there. And so I'm just excited to talk with you and hear more about your experience and the knowledge that you have to offer us. So I'd love to get into a little bit of your background, Maddy. First of all, welcome. Thank you for being here today.
So much.
So we were just connecting because you grew up Mormon, and I'm assuming you were raised Mormon, married in the temple.
I did get married in the temple. I wasn't raised in a super LDS environment. Like, yes, we went to church every Sunday, but my mom was a convert and my dad was kind of in and out of the church. And so we went, and it was more for like the image and show than it was because we were actually living it. And so there were like a few rules that my parents enforced, but not a ton. The one thing that was beat into me is to be a wife and that, I was supposed to be the stay-at-home mom. I feel like I was taught that I was taught how to be a wife more than I was taught how to be an individual. That was the one lesson that really, was beat home repeatedly in my childhood growing up in the
Yes.
church.
Yes. And then you went to BYU.
I did. I went to BYU. My dad said the only college he would pay for was BYU. So it was literally the only college I even applied for. And luckily, I was like typical Mormon girl that was like the perfectionist, overachiever. I was on every club, captain of the volleyball team, straight A student, like all the things. And so I just fed right into the BYU system.
It's great. And you met your ex-husband there?
No, actually, he was
Oh,
one of the alarm system guys that go out during the summer.
oh,
Where
okay.
I grew up out in Virginia. So we met in Virginia and
Okay.
I was still living out there. And then the next year I moved out to Utah and went to BYU. And that's when we started dating.
Got it. Because he was from Utah.
He's from Utah County. He's like South Utah County, old school Utah family. His dad was in the was the state president when I met them. And it's like its own little culty type of Mormonism in that part that I had never been like introduced to before. So it was definitely a
Yeah.
culture shock going to BYU and meeting this family. It should have been a red flag right from the get go, but I was 18. I didn't know any
Right. Yeah, like you said, all you knew was how to be a wife, and so that
right.
probably, like, easily fit into that narrative where you didn't have that sense of identity to be like, I don't know if this feels right to me," or
100%. Yeah.
whatever. Was there anything specific that stuck out when you, like, first met his family or that you were like, that's, like,
There
different?
were a few different rules that I'd never heard of that I was kind of floored by. Face cards. Have you ever heard the face card rule? Right.
I'm assuming they can't have face cards, is that what it was?
No face cards. That was a thing. So I remember I brought cards. They're just cards, right? To on
Yeah.
like a family trip or something. And they were like mortified. And we're like, we don't play with those. We went to Lake Powell and the girls, the younger sisters who were like 10 and 14 or something, were told that to be modest, they had to wear baggy t-shirts over their swimsuits,
Oh,
swimming with
wow.
their family. And the girls would have to do a wardrobe check every morning where they would have to lift up their arms and bend over and touch their toes. And if their back showed that they had to change their outfit.
This was a family vacation?
This was every day. The family vacation was wearing t-shirt over a swimsuit on a family vacation. And then every day before school, they did the outfit check. And there was also a rule from my ex-father-in-law. If girls weren't wearing pantyhose at church, then they were immodest. So, it was kind of like this, everybody's eyeing each other like, are you following these rules? And I'm like, these are crazy. I have never heard of any
Yeah.
of these. Because I just didn't fully conform, I was always kind of the black sheep of the family. They all kind of hated me from the get-go.
Well, sounds like you're maybe the smart one. So.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that is, yeah, definitely another level of Mormonism. For anyone that's not familiar with Mormonism, there definitely are some strict rules like, no drinking coffee and you wear certain clothing to cover your garments and things like that. But that's definitely pretty extreme.
This is very extreme. I haven't heard of many other families like this unless they kind of
Mhm.
lean into like the polygamist of
Right.
rules, right? So it's
Yeah.
like there's mainstream Mormon, the
Mhm.
Mormonism that I was introduced to, and then the FLDS.
Right. It's like the in between.
Yes.
That's really funny. Okay. So then you guys met before college. So you came
Before.
out to BYU. Did you get married while you were at BYU?
I did. So, and he's 5 years older than me. So he was already, the return missionary and on his way to go doing post, undergrad school and all of that. So because he was so much older than me, I only finished 2 years And I had a baby, and then we moved away for him to continue school. And when we moved, and for his schooling, we actually moved back to my hometown in Virginia. And so but my family had moved to Utah. And so I moved away from my entire support system with a 6-month-old baby. This, with the eyes of this family watching me, making sure that I was following all the rules. And it was not that they were making sure that we had a happy, healthy relationship. It was the, are you following our rules so you make us look good? And
Right.
so there was this so much like exterior pressure of looking a certain part. And I'm like, I'm 21 with a newborn baby across the country, no money and no support system and really bad postpartum depression. And so
Mm,
that's kind of when I started putting things on my Mormon shelf of like, this doesn't sit right. This doesn't sit right. And really feeling diminished and so small in the role that I was forced to play. Like it was seriously like being a caged animal
mm.
in a role that I was forced to play at that time.
How was becoming a mom? Because I'm assuming you're similar to me where you're taught your whole life, like, this is the greatest thing you're ever gonna do. It's gonna be
Right.
so fulfilling, like, and I feel like there's a lot of anticipation and build up to that. So how you said you had postpartum depression, was there anything else that you were, like, kinda thrown through a
And
loop?
when you're 21 years old and you have a new baby and, you don't have your mom around or any support system around, it's just hard. Motherhood had its moments. I feel like I really thrived. I always joke that I was trying to be like the best domestic goddess ever. I would try to do all the things, decorating the house and, with what little money that we had. And I threw myself into crafting projects and making all sorts of like handmade toys for him. And then to get myself out of the postpartum depression, I started working out. And so there were just things that I tried to do to keep myself busy. But motherhood, I had a really rude introduction to motherhood with my postpartum depression. My first was my most difficult child. He was 9 pounds when he was born. So I had like a 6-month healing process after I
Oh
had
my
him
gosh.
because I tore so bad. It was like, from every angle, it wasn't healthy and it wasn't a great experience. My other kids were easier, but my first one,
Right.
I just say is rude introduction to motherhood.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. I had my daughter in 2020, May of 2020. So it wasn't, I had, family around, but it was just like the world was such a chaotic
Right.
time. Like it
Uh,
was very traumatic. Okay. So then did you start to deconstruct your faith and then that kind of led to more of your divorce, or how did that all kind of play out?
So after my oldest was probably about 3, I remember thinking, and I had started working as well to
Okay.
help some of the postpartum depression to bring in some extra money. So I was working part time.
How did his family feel about you
They
working?
said I was selfish because I was working. Yeah. And anytime I did something for me when I went back to school, if I opened up my own business, whatever, I was always selfish for doing all of these things. Just look at it like it's a control tactic for these men who are like, you take care of everything else. I just go to work and show up when I want to. And when a woman has a way of making her own money, they start to lose some of that control. So it's, they have to do some of the reverse psychology on you to make you think that this is a bad idea. And we just want to take
Yeah.
care of you. But really, it's taking away from your own ability to provide for yourself. 2011 is when we're thinking, this isn't sitting right for me anymore. I told him I didn't want to pray anymore. It didn't make
Mm,
sense in my head. I felt like I was to chant and recite things that didn't actually mean anything, did nothing for me in order to feel connected with any type of higher power. I didn't feel like there was anything there that was listening to me. And I realized that all the praying that I did didn't pull me out of this funk that I had been in for so long. It didn't help me through my postpartum depression. It didn't help me feel like a better human. Made me feel better was serving other people, exercising, and doing things that I didn't feel obligated to do, but things that I wanted to do around my home, in my community, with my work. And none of that came from God. It all came from my own goodness that came from inside of me.
So you started having all these questions. You said you didn't want to pray. How did he respond to that?
Well, it's interesting because he wanted me to carry on the image of being the good Mormon wife,
Mm,
but he didn't lead any of that. He didn't know he grew up in this very strict family. He's
mm.
not the one who start family home evening or would do any of the things that you're supposed to do. He just put it all on me. That's part of that emotional labor that women are supposed to put on, where it's like, I just show up to church when I want to, but it's actually you that has to make me look good. So he actually didn't react much when I told him that I didn't want to pray. He didn't really ask questions. He just was kind of like, okay. But also, I'm not going to sit here and say that he was like a villain during this whole time because he was really patient with me as I was working my own stuff out. And I think he
Yeah.
realized that he wasn't fully invested in church stuff either. Right. So we moved again. We moved to Texas. 2 years into living in Texas, my shelf just collapsed. It's actually interesting how it happened because, there's so many things that pile up in the back of our minds. Like, I don't like that. I don't like that. And there were things that just didn't make any sense. We're in this great community in Texas, and a acquaintance who I knew, she was the sister of a friend of mine, posted some random post, and the hashtag that she used was Mormon, I think. Normally would just like, "Ugh, whatever," and scroll past because I was like not into church stuff at all. And I remember clicking on the hashtag and it took me to a page that had posted, I don't even remember what it's called now, but it was one of like a really early kind of Mormon stories podcast type page that was just
Okay.
debunking truths. And I don't even think the page is active anymore. I
Oh,
devoured it for like 3 days, and everything that I read, I was like, this is how I've been feeling. And just, when you first
yeah.
start and you just devour everything that you can, because all of that resounded like it was so true in my heart, in my body. Everything was so true about it. Within 3 days, I was done. Like, I'm done with church because my shelf had been so broken and overloaded at that point. I had 2 kids at that time. My youngest was maybe 3 at the time, so 3 and 6.
Like a 3-year period of when that kind of started of like, hey, I'm not going to pray anymore to then it being like, I'm
When I
done.
finally approached my ex-husband about it, like I said, he was great about it because he wasn't super churchy himself. He was just doing it because it's what he was told was correct, right? And he was like, I married you for you, not because of your church attendance. I remember being shocked because I thought he would leave me the second I told him. So that's how we ended up staying together for 9 more years, is because I was like, oh, this can work. We can make this work.
Was that kind of the first time you had that thought come into your head of possibly getting divorced? Like, if I tell him this, he's going to leave me, we're going to have to separate? Or had there been other times that those thoughts had come into your head?
So, knew from the get-go it wasn't the right relationship, and there were some things that happened. Like, I had a really good friend who left on his mission around the same time that I met my now ex-husband, and he left on this mission. I had written him a little bit, but then I was engaged and at college, so I stopped writing him as much. When we were engaged, we ran into him on the BYU campus, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I haven't seen him in forever." He was one of my best friends. I ran up to him and gave him a big hug, and my ex-husband at the time grabbed me by the arm and yanked me away from him, and he was like, "How dare you do that?" and was so mad at me that I ran up and said hi to this friend of mine. And there were some other things that happened too, just like deep jealousy type behaviors that happened. They were red flags. Now, again, I was 18, 19 years
Yeah,
old when we got married. And I was like, well, his family is more righteous than mine. So maybe I am the one that's doing something wrong. And a few days before my wedding, I actually really felt strongly that it was just, this is not okay. The controlling behavior kept getting worse and worse and worse. And I told my mom about it, and she just thought it was regular cold feet. And so she was like, everything's already paid for. They're a good family. And, she was in an unhealthy, unhappy relationship herself. She didn't know what a healthy relationship looked like. So she didn't know what advice to give me. And I don't
right.
fault my mom for this. My mom and I are still my mom and I are best friends. So
Yeah.
we've worked through all of that. But we were looking at each other in the temple. The sealer was marrying us. A voice that wasn't my own popped in my head that said, don't worry, you won't be married to him forever. And I remember being completely taken aback. I had no idea what to even do with that. And that voice lived with me for years and years. And I was trying to combat it so hard. I was like, nope, I'm going to prove that voice wrong. I'm going to make this work. And within a year, I was like, that was a mistake. I never should have married him. It was so controlling. He's also a hoarder. And so living with a hoarder when you're not a hoarder is very
Sounds
difficult.
awful. Yeah.
And it was just a constant battle. And he's so stubborn. Like, there are a lot of character traits that you can deal with in a partnership if you're not fully aligned. But someone who's stubborn just for the sake of being stubborn, I find that such an ugly character trait because there's no compromise and there's no
Mhm.
coming together.
Yeah.
When you live with a hoarder who is stubborn, it just doesn't work.
Yeah. There's no winning. So then did it almost feel like a relief when you had your out to be like, "Hey, I'm leaving the church." And did you like kind of see that as your first out of like a way out of something you knew you weren't supposed to be in from the
I
beginning?
didn't look at it as an out from my marriage because, like I said, I was really determined to make that work. And we had
Okay.
worked so hard with him being in school and everything. Like his career was our number one priority for the first 10 years of our marriage.
Got it.
So we were really going gung ho at that. And I was like, once that's done, like he went to med school. And so it was like, once that's done, things will be better. Med school and
Right.
residency is just so grueling where it's just like, we just have to get through this. Right. But I had the intention, I'm just going to make this work. It's going to be fine. And then here in a few years, things will get so much better. But they never did. They never got better. At the same time, I was deeply curious about exploring so many things in the world that I was taught to be afraid of. So, you know, even things like having a girls' weekend where there was alcohol there, or going and doing things that weren't like the approved Mormon things ever. It's just being curious about those things. It was like terrifying for him to let me go and do those things. So while I was wanting to grow and expand, and he just wanted to keep me small. And my first tattoo is a set of fairy wings right here.
Cute.
And, image that I had in my head was I was trying to fly and he was just holding my foot and not letting me go.
Mhm.
So when he finally let go because I, told him I was done, that was the first thing that I got.
Oh, it's so cute. I love it. So you brought up a little bit of the emotional labor. You said going to church and like, keeping that appearance up. I think the term I often hear is the mental load, the mental load of changing the clothes every 6 months when they get
Yeah.
bigger and like thinking about thank you notes and Christmas presents, all that kind of stuff. Do
Right.
you think of emotional labor as the same thing or do you view the emotional labor as something
The
else?
emotional labor totally different from the mental load. The mental load
Okay.
is huge in and of itself, but the emotional labor is where we get really out of alignment with ourselves.
Okay.
'Cause it's the invisible management of keeping everyone else okay around us while diminishing our own needs. So if you have to tiptoe around your partner to keep their mood happy in order for there to not be an explosion, that's what the emotional labor is. When you have to be responsible for someone else, another pretend adult's behavior and moods and their reactions to things, that's the emotional labor that we should never have to be responsible for another adult that can take care of themselves.
Yeah, I think no fault to my husband, but I have definitely done this where I just like feel like I have to manage his moods to make
Yeah.
sure the day goes good. I can't let him get upset about something. And again, not like I don't think he's ever intentionally put that on me, but I just have felt that way. And it's something I'm working on where I can let him be disappointed. I don't need to carry that. But I'm wondering if you have any advice or anything, if anybody else feels similarly of like how I think as women, we're nurturers and we just naturally want everything to be okay. But if you have any advice of how to not take that on or signs that maybe you are taking on too much and like something needs to change within your
I
partnership.
think a lot of it has to do with if your partner really does lean on you to take on the emotional load, or if you're just taking it on because you're afraid of conflict. And if you are afraid of his moods because he actually does lash out, then that's something deeper that probably needs to be looked at.
Yeah.
Because with my partner now, he's more emotionally intelligent than I am. He really leads the emotional intelligence of our relationship. And even if he has a frustrating moment and he can see me kind of getting panicked and, wondering, do I have to take this on? He's like, I got it. I'm good. If a man or a partner can't do that, that means that you are taking on the emotional load in order to soothe them like you would a toddler. And
Right.
that's not the responsibility of another adult to manage someone else's emotions. It's actually part of domestic violence is when you have to manage your partner's emotions. You just have to check yourself. And anybody
Yeah.
has to check themselves. Do I actually need to take on this? Or is this something that I learned from my past because you were parentified when you were a child because of your parents' lack of emotional intelligence? Do you actually want to create change in your partner's world and you're just trying to step up to help ease their pain? But that has something to do with, let me take this on for you. I would really love to help you out rather than, oh, I need to make sure that the kids don't bug him. I need to make sure that nothing I do upsets him. There's a big difference between wanting to help and needing to take it on.
That makes sense. So when in your marriage did you realize I've been carrying all of this emotional
I think
labor?
I didn't fully realize it until he was done with his residency training.
Okay.
Because it had been such a long process. I mean, he worked busy hours, night shifts, med student, resident, his schedule was all over the place. Because I just was in this, we're just going to plow through, get it done. I'm holding down the fort so he can focus on work. And once he was finally done and working just a normal, 35-hour work week, and then
Right.
suddenly I was like, oh, I'm still doing everything and managing his emotions now that my kids are all here a little bit older, nothing for me has changed. I'm still doing 100% of everything, though his workload has now been cut in half. And I wanted to respect that and respect how hard he worked on his career. However, I was working just as hard doing the opposite side of the coin at the same time. And my load was only getting more and more intense as I got older kids who were in all the activities. I was managing his moods that kept getting worse as well.
So then when did you realize in your marriage, I'm done, like this is it?
It was a slow downfall, I will say. I really started feeling out of alignment probably after COVID. So around COVID, I had 4 kids at home. My sister-in-law came to live with us. The world was shutting down because hospitals weren't taking on as many of the cases as they typically did. He was home a lot and was playing video games while I was managing everything at home and entertaining the kids and doing homeschool and all the things. And his sister was living with us with her new baby. And there was just so much. And we were remodeling a house. So
Yeah.
I think it was all these things happening at once where I was just like, I'm exhausted. And it was the first time I'd ever looked at my situation and been like, I'm not okay. So I remember bringing this up with him and talking to him about it. And he would say the things that would try to soothe me, but he would never actually follow through with any actions like he was invested in our life as a partnership. Remember one time that I said I would like to hire one to take care of the yard. We had a big half-acre lot and it was too much for me to do completely by myself. And it was on a creek, so there were big trees, weeds, leaves to blow. It was just a
Yeah.
lot to maintain. And I love doing yard work, but when I'm also managing 100% of everything else, it was just too much to do all at the same time. He said, "Why would we do that? That's what you're for." So
Okay.
it was very clear to me in that moment that I was there as free labor and wasn't seen as anything else. I was there to keep up his image and to make sure that his life looked how he wanted it to look while he played video games when he got home. And I'm not saying that he didn't do anything. Obviously, he helped in some ways, but when we had friends coming over for a dinner or something, suddenly that's the time to chop down the tree in the backyard. Like, no, actually be helpful, right? So that's when I really started prioritizing myself. And that's when men in my comments blew up because they're like, you started having hobbies of your own. Of course, your marriage blew up. And I'm like, and that's toxic. That's a toxic thinking right there. So in 2021, I started playing pickleball. I started reaching out and really wanted to have some really solid friend groups. So I found a fun group of girls to go hang out with because I didn't want to be home. When people would say they wanted to stay home and hang out with their husbands, I'm like, why?
Yeah.
Why would you
Yeah.
want to do that? So pickleball was a great outlet. It was a great way to get out some aggression. I met some wonderful people. I started my own business. That was really great. Getting something going of my own. My kids were also older at this time. And so were in preschool and in school, and I could focus on myself a little bit more. And in all of these steps, when I finally stopped taking on so much of everybody else and just started looking at what I wanted to do with my life and expanding
Mhm.
myself, that's when I really started noticing this isn't working for me anymore. Kept trying to push, and I begged him to go to therapy. I was begging him to do something different. He was miserable every single day. And I can honestly say, like, he was just as unhappy. He just wouldn't admit it to himself.
Right.
That was my problem, like carrying his unhappiness was my issue. And I just couldn't do it anymore. And so in January of 2023 is when it was like the final stop. But all of 2022 was a giant buildup to this day in 2023.
Okay. So what happened on that day in 2023?
2022 was a year where I was fully exploring everything outside of my marriage. I had started drinking a ton, which wasn't great, but it was an escape for me. I was hanging out with girlfriends. We would go out, and get a few drinks in the evening every weekend, it seemed like, and girls trip in New York City. And, it was just fun. And there were some people that I got mixed up with that majorly in a party scene that I had never been in before. And so drinking was a way for me to escape and realize that I didn't want to be around him like ever anymore. And so I was just constantly with these girls. We would go on hikes, we would go to yoga. On the weekends, we'd go out and hang out drinking and all of that. And I went on a girls' trip with my still LDS friends in January of 2023. After this entire year of him not stepping up, him not doing therapy, him not helping, he didn't attend a single one of my kids' fall sports games. He
Oh,
just was
wow.
not there ever,
Really checked out.
really checked out.
Yeah.
I went on this girls' trip, and my friends the whole time were like, "What's wrong with you? What's going on?" I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I was like wasting away. And I didn't say anything to them about it. But when I got home, on my way home flying, I was like, I'm giving this one last solid go. I have to give my marriage one last solid go because I've been ignoring it this last year. When I landed, he reamed me, just ate me alive in the car. How dare you leave? I was gone for 3 days. How dare you leave? How dare you, leave me alone with the kids? You didn't plan any of the meals. You didn't make sure anything was done before you left. Just yelled at me the whole 25 minutes
So was
home.
this the first time you had ever been away from your kids?
No, like yearly girls trip that I would go on. But every
Oh,
time I would leave before, I made meals and froze them for him. I made sure all the laundry
okay.
was done. I made sure carpools were planned. Like I made sure everything was done so
Got
he
it.
didn't have to lift a finger. This time I didn't. And I was like, you're a capable father. You can handle it. And it was over a weekend. So the kids didn't have school. He wasn't working. Like he should have been able to handle it. And he just ate me alive the whole 20. I was just crying the whole way home. And then when we got home, my kids were finishing up breakfast and my ex told my oldest, who was 15 at the time, to go start doing the dishes, but he was still eating. He was still at the table. And what 15-year-old's going to like jump up? Okay, dad, right?
Yeah.
He lost it and called him a lazy son of a bitch. And I realized that I take an emotional beating and a verbal beating, but I couldn't watch my kids do it. So that's when I was like, I'm done. Get out. I had to change the dynamic. And I grew up in a really unhealthy home environment. And I realized that me staying was repeating the exact same patterns.
So do you feel like as a teenager growing up, like you were taking on a lot of the emotions of kind of holding that emotional labor in your own home growing up and learning how to manage, oh, if I do this, then, mom or dad or whoever it was won't have that big outburst. And that kind of is what was
I
repeated.
actually think that was my sister's role. My sister
Okay.
took on that role. My role was if I just do everything right, like I'm supposed to, then nobody really pays attention to me and I can just kind of fly under the radar and not get caught up in any drama. That's part of my perfectionism, my overachieving in every single way, the performance. And that's what I was doing in my marriage too. I was trying to make sure that we had the perfect looking marriage. He didn't have to worry about anything. I'll take care of all of it because then that means that there's no friction. But then what ended up happening is I completely lost myself in that equation because everything that I was doing was not for me. It was for someone else. And while of course I wanted to provide the best childhood for my children, that was always at the forefront of my mind, but it was always in the avenue of making sure I was just doing everything right so I didn't ruffle any feathers. It
Yeah.
wasn't it wasn't fostering an actual healthy relationship.
Yeah, that makes sense. So before that, if thoughts of divorce had come up in your mind, what do you feel were your biggest fears surrounding that?
And I don't know if I really said the word divorce. I think I was just saying, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. And I kept saying that to him as well, but I didn't really give clarity to what that meant. I think that I had said it enough throughout our marriage too. Every time we got in a big fight, which was constantly, I was just like, dude, I can't do this anymore. But then nothing would change. And I would stay. And so, of course, he's going to think that I'm just going to continue staying. Right.
Mhm.
So the biggest thing that kept popping up in my mind through all of this was that I couldn't be a failure. And that was part of that perfectionism coming through. I didn't want to waste all those years. I didn't want to fail my kids. I didn't want to say I was from the broken home or my kids were from the broken home. What would people think? People would blame me leaving the church, even though it had been 10 years, right? And I was just like, I have to prove them all wrong. I have to, Mormon divorce stigma and all that. I was terrified about what that would say about me. I was also scared, how would I provide for myself? I've been the stay-at-home mom with side gigs. I wasn't working and being the breadwinner. So it was an actual fear of how am I going to provide the life that I've wanted to provide for my kids throughout all of this.
Yeah, I feel like that's probably the biggest fear for most women
Yeah.
is that financial piece. I don't know if you have any advice around that. If someone is feeling like that, like, I can't afford to leave, like, I can't afford to leave this marriage. Is there anything you would say to someone that feels like that and just feels stuck?
So tricky. It is seriously so tricky when you're sitting there wondering, how am I going to do this? There was a story that I'm not really going to share here, but something that I found out about my ex when my youngest was 1. And I knew that I couldn't leave because I couldn't work while having a 1-year-old, and not just a 1-year-old, and 3 older kids too. So putting them in daycare was going to be astronomical, right?
Right.
And so I knew that I had to stick it out for a few more years. And in that time, everything just slowly kind of downgraded constantly. So I think my only piece of advice is that you're the only one that knows your life situation, right? Where if you are in a predicament, go back to school. Figure out how to make money for yourself. Set yourself up for success. Think in the long game where okay, this is a 2-year game plan. It's a 3-year game plan. This is what I'm going to do while still in the marriage so that when I know that I'm ready to leave, I am prepared. It can't be unless you're getting obviously physically hurt and you need to escape, right? That's very different, but there's women's shelters for a reason in that kind of predicament. But if it's not to that point and you think that you can figure it out for 2 or 3 more years, set yourself up for success so that you can leave.
Yeah, that's great. What would you say to someone that is questioning their marriage but is feeling guilty, like even asking themselves that
I
question?
still feel guilty. I still feel guilty thinking, did I do everything that I possibly could to make it work? And I sit there and my partner and I talk about this all the time because he ended his marriage as well.
Okay.
We both hate that we had to do that, that it came to that conclusion. But guilt is different than regret. I don't
Mhm.
regret ending my marriage and saving myself, saving my kids from being in a toxic home environment. Do I feel guilty that the choices that I made affect my kids? 100%. But I don't regret the decisions that I made and where I'm at now at all.
Yeah, I like that. Are there any questions you wish you would have asked yourself
I
sooner?
wish I had had someone who was guiding me on figuring out my own identity rather than just telling me to subscribe to the identity that the church prescribes us. Oh, I actually came up with a list of 100 questions that young people should ask themselves before they get married, and their parents should ask them before they get married. Because I hate that the church is promoting that 20-year-olds get married. I'm like, they have no business getting married, but they're just trying to perpetuate the Mormon system, right? And I wish that there had been one asking me these questions so I could sit there and be like, huh, I don't really know, or I need to figure that one out instead of just go with the herd of what they're saying. So I'm happy to share those questions if that's something that anybody that is
Can you
listening.
give an example of a few of them?
Okay, these are like the top 10 ones that I came up with.
Okay.
What would make you postpone this marriage? If the answer is nothing, then that's worth examining. So if you say nothing, then that means that you're just living in denial. And if I found out that my partner was cheating on me or had been hiding debt from me or something, like, you need to know those things.
Right. Critically think about
Um,
it for a second.
Right. Yeah. And what trauma, emotional patterns, or family dynamics are you marrying into? If you're not sure yet, then you need to examine that. If the family's still living in denial that they have any traumas or anything that they're working through, that's a red flag.
Very good question.
How did the adults in each of your homes handle money, conflict, and emotions? And how could that show up in your own marriage? Do both of you feel completely safe being honest, even when the truth might be disappointing the other person? Like, are you hiding anything from the other person? What expectations do each of you have about money, work, lifestyle? Have you actually talked about that? And if nothing about the other person ever changes, would you still want to be married to them in 25 years? So you have to look and like, that drives me crazy. Can I live with that forever? Right? Some of the questions for boys specifically: do you understand that providing emotionally is just as important as providing financially? Can you listen to your wife without trying to fix her feelings? What kind of father do you want to be? Let's see, questions for the daughters. Do you feel completely free to disagree with your man?
Yeah, no, those are all great questions to make you pause. I mean, I feel like for boys, it's like, do you even know what emotional labor is? Back to the
Exactly.
basics, because they're
Yeah.
not taught that.
And I was dating again. I look at everything. I've really learned to take emotion out of things, and you
Yeah.
just look at things as evidence. So even though you can be arguing with your person, right? Take emotion out of it. And what is their body language telling you? What are their words telling you? What are their actions telling you? And just write it all down. Take your emotional outburst out of it and then just write it down, and it's all evidence. So I'm asking questions and analyzing stuff like this all the time. And when I started dating, I had 3 questions before I even let the guys take me on a date. The first one was, what was the last book that you read? If they hadn't read one, then I was not interested because they're not into personal growth or changing or anything. The second one was, when was your midlife crisis and what did you do about it? Because if they hadn't hit their midlife crisis, I wanted nothing to.
They were too young for you.
My dating age was much higher than me. And then the last one was, ask them about their former spouse or a past relationship and see how they speak about her, because that's how they'll speak about you one day.
Yeah. Great questions.
It's all about the evidence. So you just bring in as much information and then make a decision moving forward.
Yeah, I saw a TikTok about this recently. They were saying essentially the same thing. Just view your arguments or your partner's emotions essentially as data. And you're
Mhm.
just like taking in that data. And so I think for me, I'm like, okay, but then what do I do with that data? Like, what is that data telling me?
And I think that's where it's hard, because we muddle things out of our own perspective. We say like, oh, well, I kind of caused that for it to happen or whatever. But over 10, 12, 15 years, you get a lot of data, right? And one of the things that I really love is that you take action, you get clarity. If you're stewing on the same questions, the same data, the same fights, the same ruminations about things, and you don't actually change anything in your relationship or your life, you don't know if it's the right direction or not. It's just the same. And our brain is formed to want to like sameness. It's the devil we know. And so as long as we can predict what's about to happen, we feel safe, rather than thinking, no, we can change and we can improve, and it brings clarity to our life. So one of the things that I love about looking at the data that you collect is then you can make an informed decision on what you want to do. Let's say that your partner does start going to therapy, and let's say that your partner emptied the dishwasher without being asked. It's simple things like that. And then you're like, oh, that's great. And there's improvement and it's going to continue changing. But let's say you had the 15th same exact fight in a year, and the evidence is pointing to partners still not changing. Well, then, okay, then you get to change something in the dynamic and create some clarity for yourself.
I want to clarify this because the way I have thought about it is, I take that evidence. My partner comes to me, he's unhappy with something. It causes this fight. So then the evidence that I'm taking in is, oh, I did something wrong. I need to change something. I need to do something better, whatever. And so then the thing I start to tell myself is I'm not enough or I'm not doing enough. So what's a healthy way to take in that evidence?
I think it's also evidence that you write down what you're doing. It's not just what your partner's doing, but say, I showed up this way. I changed my pattern of how I responded to them to see if the fight would change at all. You can write down the things that you do so that you're completely aware. That's part of my coaching process is bringing awareness to our own patterns in life because it's not all just victim mentality, right? Like we can be married to a complete tool of a man, also have our own patterns that we're bringing in. Now, if you can be aware of your own patterns, change the things that you think are going to help propel the relationship forward. But if they still don't, then that's evidence that your partner is unwilling to change.
Got it.
So
Okay.
it's not like you want to just show up the exact same every single time, making them change. But the only person you can control is yourself.
Right.
So you present yourself a different way, see what the reaction is.
That makes more sense. So, one of the videos you shared recently, you were talking about how when people say that they're selfless, that's a pet peeve of yours, which I
Totally.
loved. And I think the Ader brand aligns with so much because, that's how a lot of people are raised, not just within the Mormon church, but a lot of women is we're taught to be selfless. It's so virtuous to just care about others and put yourself last when in reality, that's the exact opposite of virtue. You're denying yourself and your true authenticity. So can you expand more on that, on why that's your biggest pet
I
peeve?
mean, you said it perfectly. We are praised for disappearing, then it's called virtue. And no one asks what that woman ever gave up. We just celebrate that we gave it up, right? And we've made erasure look like love. And that's not love at all. How can you love a shell of a human? Can a shell of a human love another person if they're constantly taught to give? There are two sides of the coin for protecting an ego side is the flamboyant, like the egotistical man or the narcissist or whatever. They're needing to look good by showing off to others. But I think the other side of that same exact coin is needing to be quiet and protecting yourself by acting like you don't have any wants or needs. Because all that's doing is it's telling everybody else that I need to be seen a certain way, need to make sure that I don't ruffle any feathers. So I'm going to do that by completely giving everything of myself to make sure that you look at me a certain way. It's the same exact coin. While one has this fake giant ego, the other one doesn't have an ego at all, but really they're like dying inside. It's all about insecurity and needing to be seen a certain way. I'm not saying that there are some people who truly are givers and truly are wanting to serve other people and get a lot of joy from that. That is different than the person who never asks for anything and is constantly giving to make sure that they look a certain way.
Yes. I think, one of the things that you got into was like serving other people, you had mentioned earlier, which I think can be a really fulfilling thing as long as like we continue to fill our own cup. And also, I don't know if you got a chance to listen to that episode I sent you, but it's my friend Paula. She does like these sexy heels classes. She's all about helping women get their empowerment back. But she was like, fill your own cup to fill your own cup. Like, let it just pour all over you. And I had never even thought about it before because I'm like, we have to fill our own cup to give it back to other people. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, I can just fill my cup to fill my cup. What a mind
Right.
blowing
I
thought.
feel like when you fill your own cup, there's such a satisfaction with your own life. And it's not from this like constantly taking way. It's not like you need to spend hours every single day being selfish, but it's just how you feel whole in your own self. Because when you feel whole and complete and not dependent on what other people think about you, and you can show up in the world with love to give because you have love for yourself. So then it just pours out onto the people around you and you can't help it, right? versus just showing up to make sure that you a box or that you need to be seen as the selfless person. There's just such a different energy behind it.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like the latter comes with a really heavy
Mhm.
weight that you have to carry around and just constantly is beating you
Yeah.
down, where the other, it's just light.
Thing that I've seen too is people that tend to be selfless don't show a lot of emotions. And I think that it all comes together because if you can't have any physical needs, then you also don't have any emotional needs. If you can't show up fully in your emotions, then like I said, you're a shell of a person. So being able to show up fully emotionally, have needs, express those needs, and then you can show up for other people and actually meet them with compassion rather than empty sympathy. Sorry, you're going through that. I have no idea what that even feels like because I'm so numbed out. I can't even feel my emotions.
Do you have any advice for anyone that is maybe listening to this and kind of identifying with this selfless, character?
One of the things that I find super interesting, I am back in school in psychology, but I'm a little bit woo woo. So I love mixing science and woo. The things that's very cool that if you take a side out cut of the throat and also the vagina, they look the same. There's something with women who give of themselves completely and also can't voice their needs at all. Two chakras are connected. And if you can sit in your power as a woman and know yourself deeply, be unafraid of living your true authentic self, you can then start voicing your needs. The work is all internal first. Internal, talk about your needs, even if you just write it down. The things that really helps is talking out loud to yourself. You kind of feel and sound like a crazy person, but you're in the car. If you're having a moment where you're feeling something, instead of suppressing it, just say, feeling sad right now. These are my needs that need to be met. And you can meet them yourself without asking another person for it, but you just need to be able to recognize your own energy, sit in whatever emotions that you're feeling and then vocalize it to yourself, and you get more and more bold in expressing yourself the more you practice that.
Hey, I love the woo woo. Do you watch Secret Lives of Mormon
I
Wives?
don't watch TV really.
Oh, well, good for you. I am a huge reality TV connoisseur. It was all the years of not being able to watch it. And then the door was open with Real Housewives of Salt Lake. And I got so immersed into the reality TV world. That was kind of the whole reason I wanted to have this conversation, because one of the girls on it, her name's Jessie, she is contemplating her second divorce in the fourth season of the show. And then she ends up getting divorced. But that was kind of why I had this thought to start this whole conversation, because, oh my gosh, even this woman who has millions of dollars is still feeling hesitant to leave her husband. There's so much complexity around it, and you can see her arguing with herself to stay in the marriage. But anyway, so there's an episode and she meets with a healer who is an energy reader, and her name is Gabby. She lives up in Utah, but she's a friend of my sister's from growing up, and we did like a little energy reading with her. And she told me that I have some wounds in my throat chakra that I need to heal. And so it was just very interesting hearing you say that, because, yeah, it's just been on my mind
Yeah.
lately.
There's lots of ways, but men carry a lot of their trauma and emotion in their hips, which is that same sacral chakra that is connected with our womb. And so that's why I bring up the throat and the vagina cutout, how they look similar, because the two work hand in hand.
That's really
Mhm.
cool. I'm going to have to look into that more. Okay, well, let's do a little rapid fire to wrap up this conversation. I've loved it so much, and thank you so much for everything that you have shared. I want to also make sure we share with people where they can find you, because you are actively doing coaching.
Yes, I am.
Share with the people your Instagram, how they can find you, if you have a website.
Oh, my Instagram is in the second act, and my website is also in the secondact.com. And my program is called the Second Act Reset. So this is enabling yourself to grow into this next version of you that you've never been able to fully live in before. So as someone who felt aged and small and only there to serve other people, it's now my passion to help women and able to deeply know themselves so that they can blossom into the person that they're meant to be. We're not meant to be on this earth to only be taking care of other people. We are meant to be our own individual. their own needs and wants and gifts to also bring into this world. And you can't fully know what those are until you deeply know yourself. So that's what I help women do.
So it's not just divorce. It's really just about finding yourself. You can still be married and come to you for coaching, not married and come to you
Yeah.
for coaching. And then are you doing in person? Do you do virtual?
I do virtual. It's all on Zoom. And if you live in Utah, then I would love to see you in person as well. But since it's everywhere, it's mostly virtual. And it's for women who are going through big transitions. This can be post-divorce. This can be really upending the relationship as it's been. You want to stay married, but it has to be different. And how do you show up as this new version of you? Be someone who's stayed at home and they're now transitioning to working and they need that confidence to know, what can I provide for the world? There's all different ways of how to show up in your second active life.
Okay, I love it. And I can already tell how helpful of a coach you must be, because I feel like I've taken so many new nuggets away from just our conversation today. And I wasn't even trying to, make this about me and my situation, but there was just things you said that I'm like, oh, I need to think about that. So little rapid fire questions. What is something that women need permission to start doing? Like if you had to give a woman permission right now to be like, start doing this, what would it be?
Need to know that they can show up in the world exactly as they are and they don't need to change themselves in any way in order to be loved.
What is one thing you wish more mothers knew?
Children knowing you deeply be the greatest gift that you can give them. Grew up with mothers in a generation where they were supposed to be seen as perfect moms, not as humans. It created a wall between mothers and their children. Even now, I still have friends that have to change their behavior for their mother who's in their 60s and 70s. And that is just wild to me. But for your children to see you as a whole ass human that makes mistakes, that you can admit to those mistakes, that they can then come to you when they're also going through their human experience and need some guidance, that is the greatest gift that you can give them.
What is currently bringing you joy?
About to move. So I've been in a rental home for the last 2.5 years as I've been picking my life up and kind of rerouting. But my ex helped me move into this house. And so I needed a completely fresh start. So I'm moving about 10 minutes away and I'm so excited. It's all mine. My name's on the house. Like, I'm so excited.
It feels amazing. I'm so excited for
Mhm.
you. What is one thing that you're still learning right now?
To balance spiritual self, my doing self. I have a hard time mixing both. Either we'll go super spiritual and then I swing into my super doing active. And I'm having a hard time just oscillating between the two. So that's a constant challenge for me.
Makes sense. They can kind of contradict each other sometimes, right? Very last thing, if there was one little tidbit of advice, one thing you wanted someone to take away from today's conversation, what would you want it to be?
That action creates clarity. That's what we've already talked about, where if you know that something isn't right with your life, you take action one way or the other, it will lead you exactly where you need to go. You'll immediately feel a yes, or you'll eventually get a no. You'll get clarity. You just need to do something.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. Again, you can find Maddy on Instagram in The Second Act and on her website in thesecondact.com. Thanks for joining us today, guys, and we'll see you later, Aiders.
Thanks so much for spending time with us here on The Aiders. Remember, you don't have to carry the load alone. There's a whole community of Aiders cheering you on. If you loved this episode, be sure to share it with a fellow Aider. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a conversation. Until next time, take care of yourself. You deserve it. See you later, Aiders.